Ladies and gentlemen, everyone around and in between, this is Debate Sensei NFA LD edition, where we talk about things relevant to the National Forensics Association Lincoln Douglas debate event. I have with me the director of debate at University of Nebraska-Lincoln, Dr. Justin Kirk. Thank you once again for being with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me again, Jared.
All right. So today, we are doing another tournament recap. This one is called the Redbird, and I don't think we covered this one last season. So I'm interested.
I'm not sure that we did. We may have, but if we did, it was probably as a package deal with another tournament. I don't really remember how much we talked about this tournament. A couple of things about the Redbird. Illinois State hosts it every year. It's one of our favorite tournaments to attend. Unfortunately, this year we had a kind of scheduling conflicts. We couldn't travel to Bloomington Normal, but the tournament's always really good competition, brings in most of the Midwest heavy hitters every year, and the judging's always great. Competition's always good. They've been doing hybrid the last few years, and I think one of the efforts that they've been making to try and draw in-person attendance back is kind of capping how many teams they'll allow to have hybrid entries. So, I think it was 30% this year. I think the goal is to try and kind of move this tournament back into the kind of in-person only format. But if you look at the entries, you'll notice that there's a lot of teams from the West Coast and East Coast at this tournament that were definitely entered hybrid. So I think this tournament's a great example of like why the ongoing debate about hybrid, online, in-person is something that's still ongoing, right? Because of things like resource access, travel budgets, all that stuff. And so I think, if you're looking at kind of the state of debate now, post-COVID, the Redbird tournament is kind of one of those that is showing folks how to navigate doing both online and in-person tournaments the best way that they can. So
Okay. So it does seem like the entry overall was a little smaller than we see in most tournaments. But this is one of those where I noticed that the novice and JV entries are actually larger than the varsity entry.
I think this may have been the biggest novice pool of the entire year so far. And if you look at like some of the schools that were entered in novice, William Pitt Debating Union, so Pittsburgh, first. I think they've sent one or two folks out, but now they've got a rather large novice contingent coming out. Washburn's had a group of novices all year that have been really good. Especially, we were at Southwest Baptist, and I got a chance to see Sophie Grover. The Missouri Mule. Got a chance to see Sophie Grover compete from Washburn. She's pretty good at debate. And then Illinois State, Illinois. I mean, they've got a bunch of good novices this year, and then Fullerton. Always a great novice program out there.
Yes. So Fullerton Community College, one of the few community college programs that participates pretty regularly.
And another thing I'll note is for those of you out there that are looking for like some help on research, and I may have mentioned this before, Fullerton's coach, Tony Nielsen, has been putting together evidence packets for novice and JV debaters, and then putting those onto the open case list, the full files. So if you need an economy disad or if you need case nags, Tony's been working on a lot of those and producing files for the community so that novices and JV debaters don't have to worry too much about research. So
I do believe that
resource.
Yeah, I believe that was mentioned before, but there's nothing wrong with it saying it again. That looks like that's the lone California team. Not only the lone California team, but anyone west of the Mississippi, I think, if I'm...
Well, Washburn's technically west of the Mississippi.
Okay, you're right.
An hour and a half. But it's mostly the kind of Midwestern, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Nebraska, Kansas circuit.
Right.
You see at a lot of these Midwestern tournaments.
Okay.
JV division was a little smaller than normal, but I think that's because we had a few JVers who normally debate in JV move up to varsity in this tournament.
Okay.
Speaking
of west of the Mississippi, you've got Lewis and Clark right there.
Lewis and Clark had a Ann Smith. I think she's a senior this year. Really phenomenal debater.
Okay.
And so you had some JVers who moved up this time around. Zona Jackson, Olivia Fonseca, both from Washburn, typically debate in JV. We're debating in open. So I think that's why the JV pool is a little bit smaller. Those folks who've already gotten their bids to nationals, debating some harder debates, getting into some, more competition, stuff like that.
Okay.
We also had a new entry I'd like to shout out, Purdue University.
Oh, very nice.
Those in a couple of times to NFA LD. And if they're watching or if they're paying attention to the podcast, welcome into NFA. I hope this podcast is a good resource for y'all. But they're in our conference, and we always want to encourage Big Ten teams to keep debating. So,
yes. So Purdue is just jumping right into varsity. It looks like. Do they have any?
Didn't have any JV or novice debaters.
Okay. And so, do they have other debate programs? Is that the
I think they're only an NFA LD team right now. I don't think they have enough competitors to field other formats, and I don't think their director, Jim Schultz, is from the NDTC circuit.
Oh, okay.
And so I think he is kind of more directed towards evidence-based. So CARD, NFA LD, NDTC.
I'm wondering why they jumped straight into the varsity division. I mean,
you might have high school experience.
Okay.
Typically, especially as a college coach, if somebody comes in with 3 or 4 years of high school experience, probably just going to throw them right into varsity and
got it
and get the skill set up.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So I'm looking up some of these results right now. So varsity, those are the entries. Okay, here we go. So looks like a 5-round tournament. Am I right? Okay.
And there was some issues with side constraints and the number of teams entries from each school in open. In particular, shout out to Washburn for doing so well in prelims that there was triple pull-ups in round 6, and so we avoided an absolute bloodbath. Shanna and the tournament director staff decided, well, we'll just go straight to octos in the morning. Instead of making somebody who was 1-4 debate a 4-1 or a 5-0 debate a 2-3. You never want to put debaters in rounds that they're not going to learn a whole bunch from. And I honestly think that we kind of had a good idea of who the top tier of the debaters were after 5 debates.
Right.
So, and it's always a tough call as a tournament director.
Right. And the top tier,
5 prelims meant 10 people cleared in novice, 9 in open, and I'm looking at JV right now. Had 5 clear in JV in JV. It looks like a bunch of good bids got secured at the ISU tournament as well. A bunch of people who were kind of on the bubble at previous tournaments, clearing to elims and stuff like that.
Okay. So doing taking a look at some of these, starting at the novice, the breaks. Hey, we got one from Fullerton right in my backyard here. Very nice. Good job, Tony Nielsen, Gabriella Smith, or Gabrielle, not Gabriella.
And was the top seed too. I think
wow.
Undefeated in prelims. So
Okay. Dropped in semis to Washburn, but Washburn is always tough. You can't and
they've got a huge squad this year. And I think that if you're a team that's thinking about how to approach a tournament, those big squads have a ton of resources.
Yeah.
You get 12 people at a tournament, research is easier, prep is easier, intel gathering is easier. And that's really been to their advantage this year. And she debated Sophie Grover from Washburn, who I got to judge, and is quite a talented debater, right? That's not an easy debate for anybody to have in the top bracket.
Right.
So I think that was a 2-1 decision if I saw it correctly. So,
and Sophie went on to win the division.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you never beat yourself up whenever you lose to the person that ends up winning the tournament.
No. But Illinois had quite a break at the novice level.
Indeed.
Not only breaking 4, but all of them getting into quarters as well.
Yep. One of those is from Illinois State, Jack Stahl. ISU. But I've judged both of the Kaylas, Kayla Brackett and Kayla Villalobos, Villalobos, and they're up and comers. They're smart. They both of those debates that I watched them in at Southwest Baptist were They made good decisions, right? Like those are debaters, and it's clear that that kind of strategic thinking, especially in novice, are the things that kind of make or break rounds, right?
Okay.
So yeah, Illinois, great showing from them. Again, shout out to Shauna for doing great novice work, getting people into the activity that haven't done it before.
Okay. At the JV level, the smallest division, Lewis and Clark is the story for that one. Well, Truman has the same number of breaks, but
Truman had 2. Lewis and Clark had a couple. Washburn had 1.
Right.
And I don't know that I've judged Ivy before, but Ivy's been a solid debater for a couple of years, and so I'm not surprised to see them end up winning this tournament. I have judged Ben and Ryan before from Truman. They're both very good.
Okay.
This was a solid JV bracket of people. I think that I think this group of debaters, if you are somebody who's consistently going, in JV, you're getting to the bubble. These are the teams that you need to be looking at. Truman's, Ben and Ryan are going to constantly be in that kind of break round area, as well as these 2 Lewis and Clark debaters who I think Ivy was a novice last year, if I'm not mistaken. So going to be getting better throughout the year. And Lewis and Clark has Ann as their senior this year. She's got 4 years under her belt. She knows how to debate really tough debates. She's been in a lot of good debates against a lot of good debaters. She's going to help those 2 out quite a bit as the season goes on as well, I have a feeling. So Lewis and Clark got to be strong as we kind of head towards the end of the season.
Okay, so going strong this season, but it's also an indication that in future seasons that they might be sort of like the West Coast, squad to look out for.
Them and Fullerton, I think, have a lot of young talent that in a couple of years, especially as they get more exposure to kind of different argument styles, right? The Midwest debates a little bit differently from the West Coast. The East Coast doesn't have a huge NFA LD circuit anymore, so they kind of adopt the Midwestern style. But we also go out to the West Coast, or try to a couple times a year, to get some of the different argument styles, different judging styles at those tournaments that tend to be a little bit more focused on communicative practice than kind of like strategy and tactics inside the debate. And the arguments tend to be a little bit more critical than they do in the Midwest. A little bit more K-debate, a little bit more critical theory than decide counterplan debates.
Yeah. I mean, especially with Tony's background in NDT. The thing about Fullerton, though, is being a community college, what tends to happen is those students will go off elsewhere. And so Fullerton, if they, I'm speaking from experience as a community college professor, that a lot of the people that you see in Fullerton might do very well in the varsity level, but when they do that, they might be at a different university.
Well, and again, I think Tony recognizes that you can produce basically varsity debaters for somebody after 2 years, not year JV the next year, and then maybe they go somewhere on the West Coast, or maybe they decide they want to do NDT debate or card debate or something like that, and end up at a school like that. But part of it is that community colleges offer debate as in a way, because community colleges serve a very different population of students than universities do. Debate is almost like it's like one of those things that you would do at a community college that builds community there, as opposed to a university. When you come there, you're like, oh, I've done debate before, I'm going to join the team, it's a thing I do. Whereas places like KCC or Fullerton, the debate teams then serve as kind of hubs for people to get together, hang out, develop communities. Because in my experience, community colleges don't do a whole lot of that campus life stuff as do universities and colleges. Right. And so thinking about how debate functions on those campuses, like Tony and folks like Chief are doing a great service to their campuses by even providing a space for those debaters to engage. Okay.
At the varsity level, the story looks like to be all Washburn.
It is Washburn. A couple of Western Kentucky debaters, Josh St. Peter and Jacayla Brown, both very solid debaters. And then Truman State's Peyton Loatters, who has been solid all year.
Let's not forget Lewis and Clark, break into octos.
And Ann Smith is somebody who's going to consistently break this year, right? Like she has been a consistently strong debater year in, year out. And so I think if you're somebody who's planning on breaking at tournaments, don't sleep on Ann Smith. You know, and then let's see, Washburn had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Lewis and Clark had 1. Truman had 1, and Western Kentucky had a pair.
And so so that was in quarters. We still have all 5 Washburn teams, a couple of Western Kentucky, and the Truman team. So Truman, Peyton Louders, very nice. I mean, he getting sorry, my bad.
No, you're good.
I really should just say they when I don't know. That's on me. Absolutely.
Alfonso in that quarters debate.
Okay, that's right.
And they were they were AF against Alfonso. So good debate there. Alfonso's always a tough technical debate to have.
Okay.
And Peyton then debated Hunter, who was the top seed at the tournament, undefeated. And I am not surprised that Hunter won that debate and that Peyton made it to semis either, because she's super technical, super quick. And Hunter is somebody who has 4 years under their belt and can have a good debate. I bet that was kind of a clash of styles too in that round. Hunter doing the kind of like trying to move pieces around on the board, and Peyton is a very technical and fast and kind of I would say techie debater, right? And so you very clash of styles. Somebody trying to see the whole picture versus somebody trying to push every piece as far forward as you possibly can to maximize advantage. And then the other bracket, Andrew Rea and Joshua St. Peter. I think Andrew, I've seen Andrew debate a lot in the last 2 years. Probably hiding a little bit on the Washburn squad. Not to say that they haven't been performing really well, but when you've got a former national champion on your squad,
right,
and you're almost, if not as good at debate in every aspect as them, Andrew's one of those debaters that I think is going to catch people because people will be worried about Cade, or people will be worried about the other 17 Washburn debaters, right? And Andrew is just as good as Hunter and Cade. And is just as dangerous, if not more so. I think partially because Andrew plays the game really well, and understands the debate like meta and how to play into that really well.
Okay, and it looks like the result, if I'm reading this right, is a closeout for Washburn. Is that correct?
I need to double check the pairing, but I think you're right.
Because I don't see a final round; it just lists Hunter.
Hunter and Andrew both won on 3-0s in semis.
Okay.
There was a closeout and finals.
And so Hunter just walks over to a first place, technically. But
and I will say that like this semifinal round, I think exhibits something that's really like important to think about with squads like Washburn, right? You're negative in semis against 2 other squads, Western Kentucky and Truman. But you only got 2 people in the tournament, and you've got a horde of novices and JVers.
Right.
And other open debaters who can then prep these 2 affirmatives to the 9s. And that is something that Washburn has been really good at, and we struggle with as a squad in debating them, is their case debate is always really tough. Because they have a kind of bigger squad with people who can just pick through all of your arguments over and over again. Their case debate tends to be some of the best and hardest to kind of fight back against.
Okay.
They also have some good counterplans this year. I think we talked about this in some of the like key authors. They read the citizen jury's counterplan,
right?
Which is really successful. So that's not only do they have good arguments, but they have a huge squad that's able to kind of like leverage that in doing research. So I'm not surprised they won both of those debates being negative on 3-0s.
All right. So that it kind of covers the how the rounds went out and how the tournament went out. Now, is there been any sort of development in the cases that people are going for? Did anyone break out new affirmatives, new negative strategies?
Not really.
Okay.
I need to double check to see in my research for that tournament if we did any new research for any AFs. I don't think so. Florida State was still reading immigration, nuclear AI, predictive policing. No, there wasn't really anything new. I think it's pretty typical of the fall semester.
Okay.
You tend to find where the kind of core of the topic is, and people just debate that for the semester.
Okay.
I will say that if you're thinking about like, oh, the topic hasn't changed at all, I don't need to do any research over the break, I would tune into our winter debate episode here in a couple of episodes.
Yeah.
The Gorlock, which is the first major national in the spring, is a tournament you need to prep differently for, because everyone's reading new stuff for that tournament. And so if you think that, I've got all the cases that people read in the fall down, people are going to run a bunch of new stuff in the spring and test new boundaries. Additionally, something we haven't talked about this episode, the Redbird was the last time you get to read the elections disad.
Right.
The elections disad's dead. It was a pretty staple generic that everyone was reading this year. So there is a generic disad that's just gone. I do think that if you're looking for politics type arguments, there's going to be a budget debate in January. There's appointment processes. Trump's got a very broad right-wing agenda that he's trying to push through. There's going to be fights over those, especially in that Senate Majority Leader are kind of trad conservatives like Barrasso and who's the other guy that got in?
The one who replaced McConnell?
Yeah.
God, it's just a single syllable last name. Why am I forgetting that?
Food.
Yeah. True, yeah.
And then Barrasso being the whip. I mean, those are really centrist trad Republicans, right?
Right.
So I don't think that some of the more radical stuff will get through, which means there'll be fights inside the Republican Party. That's a great politics disad. Right? Anytime there's fights inside the party between wings of it, the plan can cause splinters, can cause fragmentation, especially since Trump seems to be putting a bunch of AI and crypto people around him. It seems that the Trump administration will be filled with people who are pro-AI, opposite the direction of the topic, right?
Wow.
I mean, if you think about Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, where's their investments going to? Things like OpenAI and Grok on X and stuff like that. So
that is interesting, right? Absolutely.
Advisors that are moving into the White House, the administration is going to shift substantially to pro-AI. There's already been a news article about how the Trump administration says they're going to revoke the Biden administration executive order on AI safety. So thinking about that, and we will talk about this more in the winter debate, asks are going to get more inherent. Trump is moving in the opposite direction of the resolution.
Right.
Disads are going to get more uniqueness.
Right.
So I actually think that the topic friction, the clash on the questions of what's going on in the SQO versus what the AF and the neg are advocating is going to get much more interesting.
So it seems like this tournament kind of hit right at that moment, right before the moment when all this stuff is going on, which might explain why we're seeing pretty much the same stuff that we've seen in the previous 3 or 4 tournaments settling down. But we should anticipate a sort of maybe a little bit of a sea change in those arguments.
Yes, and I think that you might see also a sea change in which AFs people prefer. Given that Trump has promised to dismantle the Department of Education, I'm not really sure how facial recognition in schools is going to be a topical AF, because the enforcement mechanism of that is through the Department of Ed, right? If he dismantles parts of the Department of Justice, I'm not sure how a law enforcement AF is going to function. So I think there's going to be a lot of implementation and funding questions moving forward that AFs are going to have to grapple with, and that might be very uncertain in the first few tournaments. So things to think about, argumentatively, that the Redbird is kind of the end of one part of the season, and the Big Tent Online, which we'll cover in our next episode, is the next big tournament that's coming up, and it's going to be a totally different way of debating about the topic, I think, because of what the Trump administration is planned to do.
Well, that is a great preview and segue into the next episode. I think that, this is, I think that's a good place to end this particular episode, because a lot of the discussion that we're talking about right now is really about speculative, right? And so I think that let's save our a little bit more elaborate discussion for that speculation in the upcoming episode.
Absolutely.
Let everyone prepare for it.
And I just let's wrap by just congratulating another just very dominant performance by the Washburn debate team.
Absolutely.
Winning novice and varsity. And then Lewis and Clark getting the JV chip this weekend.
Yeah.
I think this tournament, again, is another indication of like this fall semester has been weird. One of our major nationals moved to the spring. And, you know, you didn't have North Texas at this tournament. We had some other obligations that weekend, so we only had one person there. I think once we get to the spring semester, it's going to look very different. And so, you know, the competition is going to be very, very different than it is this semester. So keep tuning in.
All right.
Really great second half of the season.
All right. Thanks, Justin. We'll be back to talk about how to make this sort of adjustments based off of the recent elections in our next episode.
Awesome.
See you then.
Thanks, Jared.